Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode two, season four for Next Frontier Insights. I'm Yogesh Chavda. Today, I am very fortunate to have Andrew Seinfeld with me. And Andrew has been somebody that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. Even though we live on different continents, um, the one thing that I've truly admired and appreciated about Andrew is his warmth and his friendship that I've actually enjoyed over the last few years. So before I kind of like make him blush, I'm going to say, welcome, Andrew, to the show.
Thank you, Yogesh. And the sentiment is mutual. I feel the same way about you. So thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. So, Andrew, as we get into this conversation today, there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about vis-a-vis Davos. You were there, of course. But before we get into that, I'd like the audience to first get to know who you are and what your background is. So, why don't we just start there first? Tell us who you are.
Okay. Well, I did have some training on this at one point when it comes to when people ask you that question. It's what you've done in the past, where you're going in the future, and where you're at now. I'm going to save you that kind of rhetoric because it takes a few minutes to get through it. But I'm Andrew Seinfeld. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Bolt Insight. I'm leading the expansion of the most exciting and coolest market research company on the planet. And personally, I mean, I don't hide who I am. I'm a Liverpool fan. I have a growth mindset in all things business, humanity first. Everything and everyone that I talk to is always the same. I don't care if someone is the president of a country or the head of FIFA. Everyone has the potential to be your next best friend. And so for clients, for competitors, for random people on the street, I treat everyone the same, and I bring that to business as well.
Amazing. And where do you live right now, Andrew? Just out of curiosity.
All right. So I live in a city called Passau. It's in Lower Bavaria in Germany. Tell you why, but I ended up coming across this lovely city and my now wife. So I base my world travels out of the city of Passau.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. So I want to kind of get right into the conversation. So you have been instrumental in partnering with the Insights Lighthouse in not only just being part of the Davos experience, the World Economic Forum, but you were also at CES. We'll talk about CES later on in the show, but let's start with Davos first. You were there.
Yep.
Give us a sense of, why insights, why market research, why AI and human understanding, why is that part of the Davos conversation? I'm just so fascinated by what you guys did over there.
Okay, so you've been to CES, so you understand the Insight Lighthouse kind of platform and why it exists, but happy to go through that as well. So Insight Lighthouse was started by a friend of mine named Lubov, who brought insights to Davos. And so Insights Lighthouse was formed not long before, and this is now the third Insights Davos that we have done. And it's grown every year. First year was like 30 people, last year was 100, and this year probably 175. And in all, the people that are joining, the awareness of the importance of humanity in business and business ethics, and Insights leading that strategic positioning and consumer growth through market research is important. And it was important for not only the insights and market research industry, but also the world to have human centricity at the heart of everything we do. And Davos during the World Economic Forum is the place to be part of that conversation. And so as the community is growing in different areas of the world, like CES or in Cannes Lions, Insights needs to be a part of the conversation and own that strategy for consumer centricity.
Amazing. And this is a pretty remarkable shift for people because I remember with CES and World Economic Forum happening every year, I always kind of was okay, it's for everybody else, it's not for me in marketing or in market research. And then all of a sudden you guys are doing this, and I'm like, that's really awesome, you're right, we need to be part of these conversations. So tell us about what did you observe? What did you see? Talk to us about the experience first, and we'll get into the content of what you heard second.
I'll start off by saying something that a gentleman told me who I met when I was at Inkwell Beach, which is another event that happens on the Mondays of the World Economic Forum. And the gentleman told me that you have to say yes seven or eight times just to be there. And what I mean by that is that there's every reason in the world not to make the effort to go to Davos. The logistics are terrible. The flights, the accommodations are expensive. You have Grammy Award winners and CMOs staying on bunk beds in chalets outside of the city because to stay at a studio on a cot would cost you 20 grand for the week. So people are making a lot of effort to be there. And so when you have that kind of effort, everyone who said no aren't part of the conversation, but the people that said yes so many different times, the opportunity for conversations at a high level with people that actually can get things done, the connections are extremely high. I've had people tell me that they had 60 planned meetings for the week that they're there. Like, how do you're there for the content, and people are there for the conversations as well. And so for different reasons, people are coming. But I can dive deeper, but I kind of went off on a tangent there. So why don't you bring me back?
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because like Davos is not a big place, and to have all these world leaders showing up, it's not just like one or two. It's like like several dozen people show up. Then you have CEOs and CMOs and other officials that are there. So I'm sure security must have been extremely high as a consequence. And here we are, coming in saying, "Hey, we're talking about market research." So it feels so like like outside our norm, that I just felt like there's an experiential component to this as well, I would have imagined.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just market research, though it is being sponsored by market research agencies. It's about the importance of consumer centricity and how organizationally we want to structure for the future. How we need to have that research strategy eye on the future, and how to set up those internal structures, as well as the dynamics in which people are at the heart of all business decisions. And so though there is a bit of, hey, this is what's new in market research, or this is how an insights team should be structured going forward, it's about the actual growth of individual businesses and how insights plays a role in that.
Let's talk about that. So this is now we're getting into the content part of it, right? So you heard a lot of conversations, you saw presentations, you were part of conversations, and so on and so forth. So what stood out to you, the most in terms of all the conversations that you participated in?
So do you want me to take it away from Insights Lighthouse specifically, or like Davos as a whole?
Your perspective. So you can go either way. I'm totally open to either direction.
So let's start off on the outside of insights and market research, and kind of focus on the actual event itself. The conversations that you have randomly are generally the best ones that you have. Whether you're waiting in line to get a coffee or you're walking in between events, the connections that you make there are very fortuitous and serendipitous, which business happens, friendships happens, and new opportunities pop up. When it comes to content and why people go, that has changed, I believe, every year that I've been. 3 years ago, it was all about sustainability. Last year, it was all about AI. This year was also AI, but at the same time, different forms of cryptocurrency and how that is changing the financial institutions of the world that we live in. So the money that's there for specific events or specific houses is really changing based off of the dynamic of economy. Like, where can these people have the conversations that they want to have? And Davos is a really good litmus test of what people care about, as or where people are putting their financial backing. And this year, I was actually kind of surprised at how much was on specifically around cryptocurrency and the economics around it.
That's interesting, because I not that I was following all the news on out of World Economic Forum, but I didn't hear a lot about crypto. So what did you hear, or what did you experience?
So I trying to keep this off the political spectrum. There's a certain influence by a certain country having a place, a certain house, and the unregulated, well, I mean, the regulation might be coming, but the unregulation around it, around cryptocurrency, that there's a lot of opportunity for business to be had and a lot of investment going into it. So there's a lot more people who had individual investment houses or private firms or bigger players trying to attract new business. There's businesses like Coinbase, which have a really good standing in the community, but then their partnerships with companies like Aston Martin on their F1 there's a different dynamic of who wants to be seen and who's trying to gain market share. And there was actually another company called, or another house called Lighthouse, which was all crypto based. And so there's the undertone of conversations tends to change based off of what's in. And it's kind of a shame, actually, whereas sustainability was going in a very strong direction, and the last 2 years are the kind of exact opposite of that focus. But that's also the powers that are in place, shifting the world economics.
Did you hear undertones in that context in terms of people, recognizing that this insight and saying, why are we talking about this? Because we thought we were all on the sustainability track, and now why this all of a sudden?
Yeah, there's a counter to that, actually, which is nice, is that there's organizations like the House of Beautiful Business. This year, the Science House was the first time that science was actually represented on the main street, which was great. Beautiful conversations happening there about sustainability, as well as how to actually make things economically stable for sustainable future. And so the undertone is there. People that go every year can see the change when it comes to where certain houses are, where the money is supporting, because it's very expensive to be there. So further and further, certain types of organizations are away from the main street, the less funding there is for those opportunities. And so on the main stage, you would have, or the main area, you would have a lot of different AI houses, a lot of companies that want to be present, saying that they have new AI agents or how business should be ran. So there is an undertone conversation, which is slightly different than the ones that I would be having towards market research and insights.
Got it. So let's switch now to the market research side. How or where does the insights conversation fit into this broader narrative around Davos?
Well, kind of everywhere, right? So there's very few businesses that aren't trying to be consumer centric, and that's usually owned by the insights or market research parts of each one of these businesses. And for the most part, very similar to Cannes, very similar to CES, is that there's an underrepresentation of insights at these events. There's a very big seat at the table attempt by different organizations trying to level up insights importance in those organizations, especially now when it comes down to who owns the data, right? So insights is very much predominant in everything big business. It's just whether they have the opportunity to help lead that future of business. So part of the initiatives, being in Davos, being at Cannes, being at CES, is also around making sure that there is a place and everyone recognizes that insights belongs.
Got it. So were there any myths or misperceptions that were out there? I'm just curious.
I mean, I would like to turn this back on you. What are your perceptions? And then maybe I can answer them, because I go into a lot of these different experiences with an open mind, knowing I don't know what I don't know. And generally, everyone treats me with kindness and respect. I realize that's a privilege. But at the same time, the experience is very interesting. You meet a lot of different characters, and people are there for different reasons. Especially at WEF, there's a tendency to have a lot of power motivated people there, whether it's to gain power, keep power, or be associated with power, which gives them the motivation to be at these places. So there is a certain dynamic of who decides to make the effort, which if you understand the psychology behind people's motives, it makes for easy conversations.
Understand. So that's great. So we talked about the higher level thing. There was a conversation previously about sustainability, AI. Then it's now crypto. This year, it seems that was starting to emerge as a big topic, right? Then there's the whole thing about MR and insights, having representation and people trying to connect the dots with that. I get all those things. Was there anything else around human centricity as a topic area, or was it something that was just expected across everything? I'm just curious.
I think probably the opposite. of human centricity. I would say most of it's around exclusivity. And so in that case, it's about being accepted or being part of a certain upper echelon of whatever community you want to belong to.
Okay.
So there are a few organizations like the Female Quotient, Inkwell Beach, Insights Lighthouse, House of Beautiful Business. Um, Actually, Nigeria House was a place to be, very welcoming, very open, very, how can we build a better world? And the others,
Hmm.
exact opposite. It's, and then not necessarily. There's a lot of country houses
Yeah.
that are very inclusive and very opening as well. Um, Big ups to the African countries. Actually, they're very open.
Amazing. So yeah, because I remember seeing videos for like other countries as well. Like India House was, I think, a big one there, if I'm not mistaken. They were showing at least the videos I saw. They were showing different states within India having their sections or whatever it was. I don't know if you went in there or not, but um, I felt like it was a way for countries to show up and show their um, where they stand in the world community. It felt like, at least on the political side, there was definitely a lot of speeches in that context of where everyone stood. As you were there, what was the reactions that you were getting from those kinds of conversations and the speeches that you may have seen, whether you witnessed personally or you heard about after the fact?
So each different location, whether it be in the main hall or if it's at individual houses slash events that are being held on specific days, are
Hmm.
very contextual to the context of that conversation. So AI House or India House or South Africa Lighthouse, it's all very specific to the content.
Hmm.
Um, Everyone shows up with really good content. The Science House was my favorite for sure, outside of the traditional ones that I like to go to that are more inclusive.
Hmm.
Um, but the overall theme is generally like people who show up are really trying to make a difference, whether that's they're really trying to get business or they're really trying to make their industry, their people, their community have a presence on the big stage.
Tell me more about the Science House. Like since you brought that up a couple of times,
Yeah.
what did they share?
So it changed, right? So the topics will change from presentation to presentation. One that I really enjoyed was around sustainability in Asia when it came to how to best create a sustainable system for economics in which can be, whether it be less plastic or more focused on protein equity or the current problems that exist and how they're looking to solve it on a more rigorous science level versus
Hmm.
high level. Apologies for not being able to articulate the individual responses from the professors and thought leaders, but being in these types of environments, actually sharing from a different perspective. For me, being in the business market research world, there's a lot of science that's out there, but then they don't know how to activate on it.
Mm.
Um, for instance, they're not looking at the branding or cultural nuances that are needed to change people's perspectives in buying behavior. It's more of, if we can get people to change, this is what we believe will happen. Versus, okay, how do we create an economic system where this type of change can happen naturally? And so part of me being there was me being able to share my opinions and then also get their feedback on where my ignorances might be.
Mhm.
But having these conversations are incredibly stimulating, and I can't share everything, but I will be supporting a few of these scientists in their research and understanding about the evolution of the technology that they're building.
Mm.
And it's exciting to be a part of that because in market research, at least from a business perspective, it's more B2C. How do we help brands sell more products, get better understanding of their consumer? Whereas with science, it's all right, how does public perception help me either get funding or will this actually be something people will allow to happen, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
it's exciting to be part of the bigger picture and I'm just excited to be part of that.
Yeah. How about the AI house, as you mentioned? Like, I'm curious to hear. whether the conversations around trends. I would have thought that would probably be part of it, but I think the bigger question may have been around regulations and things like that, I would imagine.
Yeah. This is probably taboo to say, but most people were underwhelmed by going there, just because there's a reluctance in a public forum for people to
Mm.
speak to. So a lot of closed doors conversations happen where people uh, might not always share all of what's going on. And so it might be a lot of surface level, obvious content. How do we see the world changing in 2026, 2027, the future of jobs, the future of how we're going to do this? And no one knows the answers.
Yeah.
There was a conversation or presentation by one of the heads of AI at Microsoft, actually at the Wall Street Journal house, where it was about how the future of jobs, how we're going to augment. Actually, that's the key term there is we won't necessarily be losing jobs, but our jobs will be augmented in the needs of the human aspect, not necessarily losing or being replaced. We can see that companies that have decided to cut thousands of jobs are now understaffed when it comes to the actual application of how do we actually put this into motion. So the future of jobs around the utilization of AI will be an augmentation versus replacement.
Right. So bringing it back to, the role you were playing, at Davos, what kind of conversations happened at the Insights Lighthouse? If you're able to share even like one or two like nuggets from that, that would be really. I'm curious to hear what you heard.
So as you can imagine, with 150, 175 senior leaders, a lot of different conversations are going on.
Yeah.
This year we had some very insightful conversations, and also different speakers from the science, more research, like scientific research side. We had conversations around how the Red Cross is actually utilizing research to actually help out the people that they're trying to serve in different countries. In general, there is a certain type of person that are attending these events where a lot of the conversations are private, and I wouldn't say privileged, but generally, if it's like side conversations, they wouldn't want any of that repeated. Not because they're bad, but more of because that's why you go to these events, is to keep a lot of the conversations high level and also intimate. The presentations, the panel discussions were quite phenomenal. Lubov's ending panel conversation was very insightful. Though I would like to draw people to the Insights Lighthouse website for content so that they can try to either attend next year's events or also get snippets or recordings of the panel conversations, the presentations, versus talking about other people's presentations specifically, if that's okay.
Understand. Could you at least tell us, like, a few themes that were talked about, because that'll at least help people understand, whether it's of relevancy to them or not. Because I get the fact you can direct people to the website,
Yeah.
but since we're on the podcast, just give us a sense for, thematically, what were the kinds of things you talked about.
So I could talk about Bolt Insight and what was discussed there, as well as some other conversations, but the presentations are around how to actually utilize insights in this new modern world with AI. So the augmentation of the role of the insights leader, what is their task, their future role look like, as well as the tools and structure for each individual organization, how to best implement for the future versus, like, I would say best, Insight Lighthouse isn't necessarily about the tools, but more of the structure, and also the senior leadership, how to integrate and deal with the future that comes with the modern technology. So whether it's utilizing personas to give everyone a conversational tool to actually understand their consumer, to foresight tools that are built by other organizations so that they're able to actually see the future. Actually, by see the future, I think that's very something that you can speak to as well. What you're building as well with Yogi AI. I don't know. Am I allowed to talk about you too, or is
Good. Yeah, you can talk about me. Yeah, of course.
I mean, for me to talk about these kinds of topics, I rather lesson to you still, actually, when it comes to utilizing AI to actually build foresight engines and understanding the markets and where the trends are going. So, I
Mhm.
mean, instead of giving shout outs to other companies, I think it's best to keep it there.
I understand that, of course. So as you're talking about, like, the role of the leader is, especially the insights leader, they're trying to, obviously, for decades we've been talking about having a seat at the table. You This was a seat at the biggest imaginable table with the biggest influencers in the world, right? So I'm curious, was there any insights from your vantage point as to, w- once you're there, how do you influence? I'm just curious.
Okay, so showing up to Davos gets you in certain rooms, and that is an effort in itself. As I mentioned, you had to say yes so many times, and to the same group of people that wanted to be there. But the seat at the table is kind of a nuance of why can't I help make bigger decisions, right? So people need to actually not only prove why they need to be there, but start dictating and being open to sharing their opinion. Like, this is kind of the psychological side of, don't say we should or maybe we could, say if we do this, this will happen. This is how. So people need to build their own seat. People need to take action and take leadership, because without showing that leadership, you're never going to have a seat at the table. In these kinds of situations, being in these events gets you a lot closer to having the conversations with the people you want to. But in
Mhm.
individual businesses, they have to show leadership to get that respect. And most people tend to be, I wouldn't say crybabies, because that's a really horrible way of saying people with empathy want to not dictate to others, but people need to prove that their idea or how they want to run a certain type of project or a certain type of organization, they need to step up and say, we should do this because, and be able to back it up. I mean, you
Mhm.
became a senior leader not by saying, I want a seat at the table. You became a senior leader by saying, this is what we should do. This is how we will generate more revenue. And this is how we're going to go about doing this so it can be consistent. So
Mhm.
it depends on the individual. And I believe that, I think Nitesh from Danone said it best, you have to say yes to opportunities. You have to say yes to being challenged. You have to say yes to putting yourself out there and actually being the one that's saying, I can lead us too. If you fail, you learn. But at the same time, you have to be willing to take that risk.
And I think what you said towards the very end, you have to take that risk, is so critical, because I see a lot of insights professionals who want to be, the leaders of foresight, who want to be the ones who feel that they have, that external perspective. But you may know all those things, that's great, but you have to then translate it into something that you have to tell somebody else to go act on, which is a risk. It may work, it may not work. But if you don't put it out there and you don't try to influence, right, then you're basically, acting as extra baggage within the organization. And that does not bode well for anybody, the organization or the individual in that case, basically. So I completely hear you. And I think it's super, super important that people are, um, leaning in with an experimentation mindset. They have to take the risk of trying something new, especially in this world, like you were talking about just now. You know, there's so many changes that are happening. These senior leaders are being hit from all sides: crypto, AI, future of work, employment. That's a lot for anybody to take on, let alone a senior leader. So as an
Yeah.
insight professional, you have to help them make sense of all of this stuff.
I mean, and that's an area where most of these organizations need the most help, right? It's people don't have the confidence of how to do 2027. Where are we going? People see budget cuts or headcount loss, but no one's standing up and saying, we need this because. Most executives who have no idea how to utilize AI properly are looking for ways of saying, this is what we're doing. So we're implementing this kind of AI project here so that
Mhm.
they can show that they're part of the future wave of business. But
Mhm.
realistically, if people took an hour of their time a day to actually learn these new technologies and how to implement them into their way of work, they would be the leaders that they want to be.
Mhm.
So it is this time where people need to educate themselves on how to evolve in the future of work versus wondering or waiting for someone to teach them how to do it.
And did you feel that those are the kinds of people that were showing up at Davos? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah. Well, Yes, the people at Insights Lighthouse, absolutely. The people who are taking leadership and will be the leaders of tomorrow are the ones who show up, are the ones who say yes, and the ones who are educating themselves when it comes to going to these certain events, are taking the time to prep for different discussions, such as the ones that they're going to have in Davos. And not to say that people that aren't there aren't going to make it, because that's BS, right? There's people that are
Yeah.
working their tail off all over the world, and they don't need to be in Davos to actually make that next step.
Mm.
But it definitely helps if you want to learn from other senior leaders. And so I would advise people to find mentorship programs, to find these organizations of leadership where they're actually trying to support each other. Because without being isolated, unless you're the top 1% of 1%, you're going to be out on your own. So being part of a community, being part of the conversation is where you need to be to make sure that you're at the top of your game.
So when you self-reflect now for yourself personally, forget the company you work for, forget, any other organizations that you were part of, whatever. For you as Andrew, now that you've heard all the stuff coming out of Davos, and as you self-reflect, what would be those one or two or three things that you took away and said, this is how I am feeling encouraged about what's going to happen over the next couple of years. Here are some doubts that I've got, and the third one could be, oh my gosh, this is pretty scary stuff. So if you were to use that as a framework, just to kind of like help, answer against that framework, what would be your insight from that perspective?
Staying away from politics.
You can go talk about anything you want, my friend.
I think there's a certain amount of importance around taking responsibility for our own actions. If we want to see a change in the world, we have to be part of that change. So we need to inconvenience ourselves in which certain organizations make our lives easier, but then we're funding organizations that are funding the people or the organizations that we don't want to be in power. So we always have to self-reflect on how we can be different or how we can help. And so if I'm tying it back to Davos, like and being at the World Economic Forum, it's around showing up, being willing to put yourself out there and either being a leader and start acting like one, or going to events like this and learning from other leaders so that you can be one too. A lot of people going to these events are showing up because they want to feel empowered. They want to feel like they're part of the in group. And a lot of those people are wonderful conversationalists and great to know. And you make amazing conversations, and business comes out of it, or lifetime friendships that happens when you're grabbing a coffee. I think I mentioned that before. But standing in line is one of the most financially lucrative things you can do. Without name dropping, it's absurd the kind of power and influence that is around you, and being open, being kind, and being willing to share and listen gets you so much opportunity. If I was unemployed, I would still go. Now, I don't want more people to join because it makes everything more expensive. But in general, if you're questioning, it costs me, 3 days of my time, or it's going to cost me $1,000 to be there, that's a small amount of an investment to go, and 1,000 is quite cheap. But you can fly in this. You could take a train in from Zurich every day. And you might not go to the parties at night, but you are there during the day. You're part of the conversation. And like I said, if you're in line, if you're on the train for a few hours, you're still having conversations with people doing the exact same thing. So you have that camaraderie. You have that sense of, hey, we're in this together, and relationships form. So I would highly advise those, especially in the Insights community, those senior leaders that want to be part of that conversation, want to learn from their peers, definitely join us next year. Join us in Con for Con Lions. Join us next year at CES. And if we're in an area near you, most likely there's a dinner to network and also just be part of the organization.
Of course. So, you brought up CES a couple of times. So I was fortunate enough, to join you at CES, right? So if you take a step back and just zoom out a bit, conversations at CES versus conversations at Davos, similar, different? How did it go?
Different. I mean, as you know, at CES, we were in the middle of a showroom with all the robotics and advancements in technology. And depending on where you're at in life and what your interests are, there was something there for every human to improve their life or make their life a little bit easier or more convenient, right? I mean, I'm just a little plug. I can't remember the company's name, but the ability for a vacuum wet mop to go upstairs
Yeah.
and there's like that. That's worth an investment of $700, $1,000, so that I never have to clean the floors again. Like that is insane technology. What scares me
Yeah.
is the fighting robots. Like there's an unlimited amounts of sci-fi out there that tells you what happens as we have unchecked innovation on robotics
Mhm.
and alien intelligence, or you can call it artificial intelligence, but alien intelligence. And so it comes down to, okay, who's creating it, who owns it, what data is being tracked. And so there's a lot of fun and scary things that are coming out, and regulations in different countries will the rest of the world will kind of change based off of who's leading it. So yeah, it's definitely more about innovation and robotics at CES. Really cool content. I mean, I really enjoyed CES. I mean, we did 4 days of content, which was fabulous, and Davos was 1 day, and you have multiple days for different events. But the conversation around what the topic is, how, especially for us with insights around the innovation and understanding of consumer behavior around certain interests in certain products, how to best connect with consumers. That consumer centricity is very more focused on the product side at CES, and then also in Davos, it's more on the economics and structure and leadership positioning.
Amazing, amazing. So you brought in the whole thing about the connection between insights and technology, right? The world is shifting. You brought up robotics, like that feature isn't that far away now, right? So if you're looking out and you had to guide the insights industry, let's take robotics as the example. What would you say to the insights industry? What would be the call to action? Because you are one of those people that I know who has been very consistent in having one voice around the fact that don't lose the humanity with AI, and now you have robotics coming along. So how are you, reconciling that new future, and what would you say to the industry as a way to help them prepare for that future?
So I have a personal, I wouldn't say it's a vendetta, but a personal fear around how we as insights professionals
Hmm.
are utilizing technology to get deeper and quicker insights. And that is around the use of glasses for doing qualitative research, shop alongs. And to me, who owns the data is quite important. Who has access to that information is quite important. Where that data is being sold to is quite important. Right now, we have a very scary setup of businesses that are utilizing the technology to terrorize certain communities of people. And as insights professionals, for us, the idea of utilizing this type of technology to be able to understand a shopper, or understand ethnography, or people's houses and how they're utilizing certain products is one thing. But if we don't regulate who we're sharing that information with, when that's turned off, how are we properly educating the people around us, then we're self-policing each other. And I personally think, though it's really cool technology, is that I don't want a world in which I live in where everyone is spying on each other with their glasses. And there's individual companies that are controlling that and understanding that for people policing. We had that about a century ago, and we saw how that ended. And we're at a precipice now where people are slow to, no, I get to take that back. Many people are mobilizing against certain types of actions. But for us and insights, utilizing that technology, which would be great for our businesses, might also lead into how can big business take advantage of that, and also citizens of individual countries. So that is one area that I want there to be some regulation on. I think organizations like the Insights Association in the United States, SMR, Even leadership organizations like Insight Lighthouse having a certain type of voice and actually regulation that needs to be implemented. I believe, actually, I think this was a common theme from Davos, is that any type of world regulation to be human centric will come out of Europe. Europe is going to be the leader of that. The United States at this point has zero interest in protecting its citizens from its own governance. And we've seen in other parts of the world very similar actions. So Europe, though slow to act on certain types of industries, so like AI, robotics, that's being led from the United States and Asia. Governance is being led from Europe, and if they don't take a stance on it, then it will be self-reporting. The applications of using glasses that are always feeding you information is limitless. But if we're not controlling who owns that data, and which is why I believe insights is so important, especially when we're talking about the humanity that's part of that consumer centricity. Making sure that that research is for good and not for evil.
Right. So, you've kind of like touched on something that can go in either direction, and I don't think anybody has, an answer to what I'm about to state here. On one side, I said earlier, like we want, insights professionals to lean in and take risk, right? But what you just talked about is actually not talk about taking risk. Now this is about governance and being risk averse, in a way, right? Or it can be construed that way. Let's put it that way. So there's a fine balance here. So how do you balance that? I guess is the question, because you do want to see where the technology can go and how far you can go with it. But I completely agree with you. Like there are the misuse of technology, like the example you gave with glasses. There are nefarious things that have been happening, which is completely inappropriate. So how should businesses then map that? I'm not looking for a, do the 5-step solution here, but from a mental model perspective, what would be your suggestion or your advice to people as they're thinking about that question?
If we're looking on governance, I think it's around consent. Consent needs to be the most important, especially in the world of AI. There is too many opportunities to deceive people. And through research, even with Bolt, where we have invented AI moderated qual, there is a complete transparency of who they're communicating to, what information they're sharing, and what information we have, and then also compensating people for their time. We need to value people's time. And right now, for most budgets, for most businesses, there isn't a lot of value on that. It's about the margins on minutes. Unless you're working with like a market research agency that actually cares about the data quality, then it's about how can I leverage consumers and then sell to potential brands and just leverage minutes. So I would say making sure that consent is important, making sure that people understand that research is going on, to not be doing research in public forums where people haven't consented. But that's not for me to decide. I'm not on the boards of SMR or Insights Association where they actually have lobbyists trying to actually make those distinctions.
Is it about time really, or is it really about the data itself? And I think this is one of the mismatches that I see in the industry, right? Where, you're right. Today we compensate people for their time to participate in surveys or in focus groups or whatever the case may be. Even AI moderated sessions that your company does today, right? But really, if we were to push back on the existing paradigm, the value is actually not in the time. The value is actually in the data that the consumer is giving you. So why not compensate on the data versus the time? And I don't know how to do it, but I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, I got a lot of things. I got a lot of things cooking on that side through consent and not only compensation, but compensation for data. I think as insights, the insights world needs to recognize people's privacy and their data and compensate people for the information that is shared. So whether it's individual, the more data you share, the more compensation you get versus the opposite, where it's just someone's time, because data quality is junk. If you are utilizing traditional panels and doing DIY research, data is really terrible. You have to do a lot of cleaning. Whereas if you work with an agency that cares first and foremost about you, and everything is based around that. So
Mhm.
for me personally and Bolt, we have a lot of things cooking around making sure people are being paid for data quality responses, and that's the only things we deliver. We have more products that make it like you have to have the best data quality, otherwise the other products don't work.
Mhm.
Um, the humanity side of it and also the data quality is the most important. That's
Mhm.
also something that is difficult for brands. Their budgets are being cut, their headcount's being cut, time is limited, and they're expected to do more. Hey, AI, you should be able to solve X problem quicker, right? And
Mhm.
so quicker doesn't necessarily mean quality. And
Mhm.
so people are making a lot of bad decisions, but the different tools out there make it able to get data quicker, but it's not quality data. And especially with AI moderated qual, it's the Wild West of GPT wrappers with people with no research experience who don't care at all about the respondents, don't care at all about the brands, but just want to get margin. They're flooding the market and they're getting funding. And so the brands out there are looking for the cheapest way to do AI moderated qual, for example, but
Mhm.
then there's no data quality or no research acumen supporting it, and it's just junk.
Mhm.
Whereas with agencies that actually know what they're doing on the research side, you can trust that data quality is the most important thing because we're in it for the long haul, not for the IPO.
Right. Right. I get that. So, Andrew, we've talked for quite some time right now on a lot of different things. I'm curious, as you look forward now, right, and you had to give advice to people about, you know, like you said, there's budget constraints, there's, more work for fewer amount of people within the organization. You're seeing this in your conversations with your customers and your client base right now. I'm sure, right? What would you tell people, you know, um, what's coming next, or what is it about the next 6 to 12 months where you would say these are the one or two things I would tell everybody that you should be thinking about and acting against? What would that be?
Oh, besides working with Bolt, you mean?
Yeah, sure.
So I do think what everyone should be doing. I mean, everyone. Can we be more a little bit more specific on the actual the category of people?
Let's say the insights professionals, insights leaders, insights individual contributors, who have to, who've got lots of demands on the client side on their end, right? They're trying to influence, they're trying to get things done. I talk to, clients also every day, and I hear the challenges that they face, right? So everyone's looking for a way out. Everyone's worried about burnout,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody wants to, and everyone's anxious about, job security, right? So in that context, as you're looking out for the next 6 to 12 months, what would be your one or two things you would tell people to consider?
There's some organizations that are too big, depending on people's roles to have the influence they want. For
Mhm.
example, organizations that'll cut 14,000 jobs and people know it's coming and they don't know they're a part of it or not. That
Yeah.
it's a really tough place to be, and it's hard for me to give advice unless they're at the senior leadership level, who
Mm.
can try to dictate that. But even at that senior leadership level, especially in insights, they might not have the voice of the CEO. They might not have the voice of the CMO or chief growth
Mm.
officer, depending on how the individual business is set up. But if you do have an organization in which you do have voice, share it. Sometimes go against the grain. There's organizations out there that are doing less research and utilizing their research that they currently have and augmenting it with, say, for example, an updated jobs to be done or customer journey, utilizing old research, but then showing how you can actually grow and do current projects based off the information you already have versus just being answer takers. So
Mhm.
I would suggest on a couple of things. One, voice your opinion and stand by it. Stand
Mhm.
up for what you know is to be right around how to actually solve business problems,
Mhm.
and work with professionals, and stop trying to utilize tools as the only way to achieve those goals. If you are on the outside of an organization or you recently got cut loose, I would look for organizations that are human centric, that actually want to help people or help businesses grow, versus just see them as margin or as an uptick in their ARR. So generally, you need to be the leader that you wish you had.
Hmm.
And that starts with starting having conversations, whether that's showing up to events on your own time, on your own vacation, going to market research events where you can have conversations with other leaders to actually learn from them,
Hmm.
joining communities like the Insights Lighthouse and the mentorship program so that you can actually be upskilling and up-leveling how to solve the problems that you don't know how to solve. Um, this is the year to take action, but not only for the business, but for yourself, because you can be in a new job next year, but the skills that you have, the relationships that you have are the most important, because there's too many opportunities, or there's too many people looking for an opportunity. So if you're not upskilling yourself, especially with different AI tools or AI skill sets, whether that be through automation or reusing current research and augmenting it with new research versus doing full new projects, then you're going to be on your way out eventually. So make sure that you understand what's capable and then work with humans that know what they're doing.
I totally agree with that. And as part of that upskilling is you have to be curious and you have to learn from people. And quite frankly, I have too many people asking me saying, "Is there a course I can take on this?" And I'm like, the rate of change is so significant right now. By the time courses get built, that information is probably going to be somewhat obsolete. Not
Yeah.
100%, but at least 50%. So the time you spend waiting for that can actually be detrimental for your own personal growth journey as well. So I encourage people to actually follow those content creators who are actually putting out content that's relevant and dare I say insightful to help you grow. So
That is an interesting take, where influencers were at the beginning of the TikTok and Instagram generations to where they are going now.
mhm,
Personally, I believe that B2B will soon be commercialized like B2C, because the targetability of each different consumer. And influencers, as most people don't like that term as an influencer because it makes them feel devalued. It's almost a taboo. You know all about how to reverse stigma and how to do stigma, deal with stigma in research. But there are a lot of different people who know what they're talking about, and spending surprisingly a minute, 2 minutes listening to them as the technology evolves is a really good way to actually stay on top of what's new. But you can't listen to everybody, and you can't trust everybody, because a lot of them are actually being compensated for bringing in new business. But I would say have fun with it.
mhm.
There's so many tools out there that your creative side can come out. I'm not an artist, but I have all kinds of fun messing with tools like Sora, for example,
Yeah.
and creating videos or little, just messing with the different prompting. The more people get their hands on it, the less scary it becomes. It opens up the door to understanding what is out there and how to utilize these different tools.
Amazing, amazing. So before we end, I have to bring in somebody else into the conversation, which is
Please do.
the
Ah,
little squirrel. So tell us about the squirrel, my friend. So many people have asked me about the squirrel. What's it all about?
so, if you've been to a conference in the last, I don't know,
Year.
last months or so, right?
Yep.
You probably came across Bolty, the Bolt mascot. He was the genius idea of our CEO Hakan, who really quite came to it on an epiphany. But at the same time, it's a perfect representation of who we need to be as insights professionals. We need to be curious. We always need to be paying attention. But the reason for the squirrel is because we're nuts about insights. And yes, it's a great dad joke, but at the same time, it's true. We are. We love consumer research. We love being consumer centric. And there's more to come on the creative and branding side there. But at the same time, it's a lovely way to keep things light. Business needs to be fun. And people who aren't having fun in business probably hate their life. Honestly, like working with Bolt has been a dream. We have fun at work every day. Our clients have fun working with us. Wherever we go, we bring smiles to people's faces. I can't name everybody, but there's after every conference or every place that we go, the following days we'll get messages from people's children sleeping with the Boltie. They don't care about their other toys anymore. After Christmas, they spend hundreds of dollars on their kids' toys, but the Boltie is the only thing they want to play with. Or, it's a center part of their house in the fruit bowl. And it's lovely to see that when we're looking at branding and we're looking at how to be playful, we're able to connect with human on a deeper level, which is we all want to be part of a community. We all want to have fun. And, it's just fun to be part of an organization that cares about people and gives them what they want versus just some random swag that they toss away 5 minutes later.
So some random person stuck a it on your jacket shoulder, right?
Yeah. So, I thought it was cute when I joined Bolt to use AI tools to create a squirrel jumping on my shoulder as the mascot as I was joining Bolt. And there's a certain someone, I won't say his name, Yogesh, who saw that in Chicago at the CRC conference by Insights Association and pinned that to my shoulder. And I tried out on the hat a little bit, which didn't really work out well, but having a little Boltie on your shoulder is quite helpful to remember that. For me, it reminds me to be consumer centric, reminds me to be kind, and reminds me to stay curious. So it's fun to be part of this company and having a mascot like Boltie.
I have no idea who was that person, but I think you dropped a name in there somewhere, but I don't know who you're talking about. But I think what you now need to do is you need to have a male and a female version on your shoulders, on both shoulders, and one's the devil, one's the angel. I think that's where you need to go towards, my friend. So
I will take all ideas. I definitely Boltie is gender agnostic. We do not define Boltie as anything, at least as of yet. We could have conversations. AI is quite helpful in talking in different languages. Maybe we can talk to Boltie himself one day and figure out what he is, but they are. So Boltie is also a representation of research, right? We need to be curious, and there is no right or wrong when we're understanding humans. We need to understand how to connect with them. And so good or bad, we need to understand and be open to other people's opinions and what they like and don't like. So I like being a bit agnostic on gender or on good or evil, but I'm sure there's some mischief and some sanctity in there somewhere on both sides of that side.
Who knows? There may be a Valentine's version there, Andrew. I'm just saying. Saying.
Oh, there's all kinds of customization. There's all kinds of branding and co-branding going on in the background. But like you have the American Bolt Chat AI Boltie. This is our newest Boltie that we brought to Davos. So there'll be, get your collection ready. It's not a single item. We'll see you at the next event, and you'll have to get your Boltie when you see us.
I expect to see one on my shoulder for sure. So, Andrew, I can't thank you enough for making time today to talk with us. Your afternoon, my morning. I do feel that just even having this conversation, I think it is insightful for a number of reasons. You've kind of shown through your passion why it's important to show up at the right places, and be even when you show up, you have to be curious and be open to listening. And like you said, conversations can happen everywhere, and it's important to be willing to lean in and engage, basically. So for me, that was like a really big, I won't call it insight, but more like, a good reminder for everyone that you got to be human. And this is how you be human, by showing up and being part of conversations, basically. So for that, I thank you so much for being here. And any last words before we sign off?
Just make sure you check in every week for one of Yogesh's podcasts, because it's very insightful, and he's a great person to listen to.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And also I have my newsletter, In Search of Normal, that comes out usually on Monday mornings. So between the newsletter and the podcast, I'm trying to make sure we have conversations about AI and insights and marketing. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Check out boltinsight.com. Come and talk to us.
All right. Okay, bye bye.
Yogesh.